Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB Bikini Pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Rains-Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. Our fifth guest is not just a coach with 13 years of experience with athletes and lifestyle clients specializing in the overall package, presentation, glam, suit, sportsmanship, and creation of healthy, happy athletes, but she's also an IFBB Bikini Pro who has competed in 45 shows herself. And during this journey, she's turned over 50 women pro, and she's the author of the Bikini Bible, and she founded Team Boss Bodies. So welcome to the show, Casey Marshall. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I'm happy you're here for the Coaches series, and I know we have a lot that we could talk about. And obviously, you being an IFBB Bikini Pro, you're special to this show for that reason as well. A lot of listeners will identify with you, but I want to specifically talk about your role as a coach in the industry because that seems to be something that you've developed over so many decades or almost so many decades, I would say, but you developing as an athlete and then starting this. So why don't you break down your coaching philosophy for us and then maybe how it's evolved over those years?
Okay. So I would say our coaching philosophy is very individualized, like per athlete, because everyone comes to us and has a completely different history and completely different goals. Like if you were to ask me, do you keep cardio under 30 minutes? I couldn't say yes, because if someone comes to me and has always done 3 hours of cardio, there's no way they're going to get ready for a show and do 30 minutes. So if I were to say our philosophy, it's really specializing in each individual athlete and what's best for them, and not just for the short term, but for their long-term goals as well.
That is so important because I think there's a tendency to promote a very extreme approach or mentality when it comes to this sport, where a coach might make a statement like they'll never have their client do blank. But then, over time, suddenly they're getting more competitors or they're getting girls who have had to do those things. And now, okay, well, we have to modify, we have to adapt, and it can't be so this or that. And obviously, like coaching itself can be individual too. All coaches are different. So, what do you personally think makes a coach a good coach?
I think what makes a good coach is one, caring about the athlete, and two, the communication. More so than anything, more so than philosophy, more so than science. It's really like having someone that you trust taking care of your training and nutrition, and someone that you feel comfortable disclosing everything to and being honest and transparent with. And that goes on both ends, because when I have a client whose body isn't responding, it's that hard conversation of like, this is not the right move, or it's just not the right time in your life because financially you aren't ready to compete right now. And so I feel like being able to have those conversations builds those long relationships.
Yeah, if you're not willing to have that conversation with your coach or a coach with their athlete, I think there's so much that gets missed where an athlete either feels like now they have to manage all those things by themselves, or the coach is like trying to just figure out what is going wrong. Well, I can't, if they're doing everything that they're supposed to be doing, but now I'm not hearing any of the other crap in their life that could be happening. What's really what's really causing them not to achieve this result? So that might answer this question, but what do you say, or what would you say makes someone a phenomenal champion athlete as opposed to just a good athlete?
I'm going to say mindset. I've seen people with horrible mindsets and great physiques get like demolished in a year, where they turn pro right out the gate and they can't handle a loss. So I would say mindset is more important than anything, because you can change your body, you can shape, you can grow, you can develop, you can improve. But like your mind, if your mind is in a good place, your body is not going to be in a good place. So I would say the mindset in this sport is more important than anything.
Is that something that you address heavily or find yourself addressing heavily when you are working with clients and developing them into that type of athlete who has sportsmanship or has that longevity?
Yeah. So obviously, like, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist, but as a coach, you almost play that role in a sense because you want to be the person they trust, that they can come to, they can be honest with. So I would say all coaches are therapists to some extent, but if they really do need help with something, like they're having a weird food issue, sometimes just normal coaching can't solve that. They actually need to see someone who can help them work through those issues.
Definitely. Yeah. And I appreciated I got to speak at your seminar. That was such a amazing weekend for me back in, it was a beautiful retreat. I have some of the best memories from that. It was one of my most positive experiences as a speaker. And it was so cool to see what you had created with your community. And you're right, coaches do play like a therapist's role. I always liken it to a secure attachment. Coaches have that opportunity. They're like that first point of contact that someone can develop a secure attachment with. And when a coach doesn't respond or doesn't fulfill obligations, or maybe the client doesn't do that, or maybe doubts it, there becomes an insecure attachment that can, I think, create an unhealthy mindset that moves forward in their journey and maybe jades them with future coaching or even pursuing this sport. And if we address the mindset, now we actually have people who can capitalize on their potential to be champions because they're not letting it eat away at them.
Yes. And I feel like there are no good and bad coaches. We're each completely different in what we offer, how we communicate, and like how our programs work. Like me, myself, I don't believe as a female, you can go like 16 weeks and not have a refeed meal, not have a meal out with your family, because ultimately I'm worried about those relationships you have as well. Because I don't want to turn you pro and now your husband wants a divorce, because that's not good for you as a person. So I really try to make sure I'm thinking about all aspects of their life and their own mental health when they're doing this, because it's easy to go, okay, I can go 4 months without a refeed, but how are you going to act with food after you go 4 months without a refeed? It's like, okay, if you've been doing it for 3 years and you're a pro athlete, you know you can do that, it's different. But when you're new to the sport, it feels like I can just power through this, but then you may be creating that resentment or that weird food, issue.
Oh yeah, that was me, my first show. Well, I was already so strict, like before I got into bodybuilding, because I was like in a disordered mentality, and bodybuilding let me like take it and have a reason for being disordered. But I realized like that approach just wasn't helpful for me long term. And like you said, if you're a coach who's presented with an opportunity to take a client to the stage in 8 weeks or in 16 weeks, and the 16-week route is going to potentially give them another year or 2 years or 5 years in the sport, it makes more sense to do that. And also, like you said, athletes who set aside everything for the sport and then they get to the end and they look around and no one's there.
Yeah. And actually, Janelle and I know you know Janelle very well, but we're writing a book right now about the support system an athlete needs, for athletes and supporters. Just because there is this misunderstanding that, like, athletes feel like, I'm making the sacrifice. Everyone in your life is making a sacrifice when you're doing this. You're irritable, you're hungry, you can't go out to eat, you can't drink. Like, there's different things that fall in line that no one really talks about. So me and Janelle wanted to help people kind of navigate that.
That's awesome. I think that's going to be so good, like as a resource for people who aren't competitors, but maybe are dating or supporting one. Because there are things that I've learned from communication standpoint that need to be expressed. Like oftentimes we see competitors come into the sport and they're like, I'm going to cut everybody out because they don't support me. And then it's like, no, they literally are grieving a version of you that no longer exists, that they had to get used to now being different. And we are quick to want to cut out because let's be real, the sport can attract a more extreme mentality. But if we do it the right way, I think, and you've spoken to this point, and maybe this will be something you can expand on, but even if it attracts an extreme mentality, I think it takes a lot of maturity to get to that point where you're not taking extremes to get to the end result.
Yeah, extremes are easy and balance is hard. So, when I see someone who can be really extreme, it's not as impressive as someone who can actually maintain and have balance. Because that's what I feel like our sport is missing sometimes, is that mentality of like, there are always going to be shows. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Because yes, you're going to keep pushing to turn pro, but guess what? Once you turn pro, it's even harder. And then once you win a pro show, it's even harder. And so I feel like you have to be in a system where this is like a long-term commitment, not a short-term sprint.
Yes, that's exactly right. It is so easy to exist in extremes because it becomes predictable. Like I know if I cut out all of these foods, or if I never eat above X amount, I will lose weight. But is that really a sustainable result? Is that really something that is going to add to your life? And like you said, it is more impressive when you see an athlete who's been able to continuously progress year after year because they've stuck the course and they didn't sacrifice their family. They were able to progress in their career or their relationships or their friendships or whatever they might be studying or doing. That is impressive. And I had a client who I was speaking with yesterday. She was like, "Are you going to prep this year?" And I was like, "Just we'll see, like I think we are, but if it's not in the cards, it's fine." And it took me a long time to get to that mentality where I'm like, there'll be a time. But then she said, well, it's more impressive. She was like, I love seeing, and I'm impressed that you're able to do your post show and your reverse and your improvement season without getting that distraction of like the prep mentality or that big pendulum. And I'm like, that actually means so much more as an athlete to be able to do that than just do it because you want the physique.
Yes. And you almost have to fall in love with the process because the process is what you're doing the whole time. The amount of time you're on stage getting a trophy, it's very, very small in comparison to like, do you enjoy training? Do you enjoy going to the gym? Do you enjoy like having a lifestyle where you're, paying attention to all your food? And that's just one of those things where some people realize, and I really commend my clients who realize after 4 months, I'm not a bodybuilder. I don't want to do this. I want to eat out every single day. I don't want to go to the gym. Like, I'm glad you realize that because now you're not going to waste years just because you want a trophy or you want to get on stage because you
Yeah.
have to do every aspect of it. And I think especially the part where you're improving and progressing versus just getting on stage.
I really like how you said that there's been people who realize it's not for them because as much as we can take that balanced approach, and I think there are optimal ways to pursue bodybuilding, sometimes it's still like we can't get away from the fact that there's a hyperfixation on these parts of the process. And sometimes that's just not what people want. How do you personally approach maybe maintaining a client's overall health in their preps and improvement season so that they can have that maybe long-term journey if they are interested in continuing?
So I always make sure like after we compete that there is a solid reverse, that we're like slowly increasing food, decreasing cardio. We get to a point they're at zero cardio during their off season, unless they have the preference of like, I just want 10 minutes to warm up. I also always implement higher days, refeeds, and I pay attention to their body and what works best for their body because I have clients I've had for 7 years where what worked in 2017 doesn't work in 2022 anymore because their body's completely different. Like as we age as females, our hormones change. Sometimes I have to send clients in and say, let's go get blood work. Let's look it over with a nurse practitioner. Like we need to figure out what's going on because something hormonally is off. And usually testosterone's low or there's been some sort of change. So that's how I approach it. I always make sure that what we're doing is realistic long term, not just for a 16-week prep, but also I feel like the most important part is when an athlete's off stage. So what you've been working on, like your improvement season, your off season, your reverse, that's where I'm really trying to take care of a client and get their body in optimal position, not where we're gaining a bunch of excess body fat, but we're meticulously upping food, lowering cardio, and paying attention to like how well the body's responding. If we need a longer off season, we take a longer off season versus like we only have 2 months, then going back into prep. Because for some people, if they're already genetically lean, they have all the muscle they need. I had a pro compete with me this year where she could do 7 shows in a row and she just held muscle and she could stay lean on 500 grams of carbs. And yeah, that's great. She can compete all the time. But I have girls that are thinner that, they need the extra time off to really build. So it's really paying attention to each client and what their body can do.
Yes, there's like this issue with comparison constantly. I mean, we are being compared, but I mean, outside of the actual
Yes.
stage, where it's like, oh, they're able to keep prepping all year, or oh, they don't have to go into an improvement season. It's like, yeah, but there were they like that's part of their feedback. Like, no one's telling them to go put on muscle. So, how do you approach that actually? Maybe you could expand on that further. Like, how do you approach it with a client who's maybe really well developed and they're where they need to be in the sport, don't have to go to maybe a big improvement season, but then you have someone else who, hey, you've got to add size, you need density, you're not there yet. How is that approach different?
So let's say an athlete has all the muscle maturity and they hold good conditioning. It's still important for them to get to like spend time with their family, have a mental break from dieting as well. So I still feel like planning shows where they're not just doing a year straight, but they can like have Christmas with their family and have a couple months where they're not as strict so they can enjoy a little bit. And that way they don't get like resentful or bitter towards dieting. Like I want them to be excited when they prep. And also like I talked about financially, I think it's so important to be in a good place. And as a pro, most athletes are not competing for a living. This is something they do and they have a career. So I also think it's important that like they financially are ready. If their body's ready, is everything else in line? Is your husband okay with it? Like with your kids, like does it make sense for them, or do your kids need a vacation? So I think it's like having everything in alignment. Also depends on their goals. If their goal is to get to Olympia, you don't want to run someone's body into the ground. If you're trying to get them to Olympia, you want to pretty much have them as rested. A rested body looks amazing. If you have someone who's conditioned and their body's rested, opposed to going show to show to show, there's a different look that happens as you get tired, because the traveling's a lot on our bodies too. So kind of taking all that into account, I like to put shows together and not too close where they're just hopping back to back, depending on the body. You know, some bodies can do that. They can fly and not look different. Most females retain water when they fly, though. I can tell you that, coach. I have some clients, I'm like, get there a week early because I know you're going to look like a whale, like as soon as you land. It's like their ankles swell up and everything. But let's say I have a client that needs muscle and like development, like they need to have more strategic time off. And sometimes it's hard to say how long they'll need, because I feel like the best method is you go into that. And then when your body shows that you have that development, okay, let's do a prep, opposed to going in these circles where you have a few months that you're in off season, then a few months you're like dialing in again. And then you have to go in that cycle and you're really not making the progress that you need.
Definitely. It's scary for a lot of competitors to actually commit to that improvement season because they don't know what their timeline is. They don't know what to expect. And it's that, well, what if the judges forget me? Or what if I don't look how I need to look? How do you manage those types of fears?
So I feel like there's a way to stay involved in the sport without you just stepping on stage, just like you've experienced. The women's workshop just happened. There are plenty of ways to make those relationships and go to shows, help at shows. Say, hey, do you need help expediting? Do you need help, you know, with anything? Because usually promoters do need help. They need help setting up the chairs, whatever it is. And you can make relationships that way without having to put your body through the ringer. And that's more respectable if you're able to do that, because I will tell you 100%, it took me so many years to turn pro. And as soon as I turned pro, I wanted to compete as a pro, and I did 7 pro shows. I was just going show to show and I was so excited about it. And Sandy, one of my shows, I was first call out. She said she couldn't place me top 6. And she was like, listen, you need to grow like your hamstrings. Like you need to develop, like, and you're not going to develop if you just keep competing. And I think the biggest thing, sometimes athletes don't listen. And the minute she said that, I'm like, that's it. I'm done. I'm tapped out. Did I know it would be years that I didn't compete? No, because I just enjoyed, after that, I enjoyed coaching so much, and I enjoyed training and not having to be as strict with food and getting to eat sushi, you know, every other day, that I didn't want to go back into prep after that. And then my hamstrings did grow, but now I'm like, I just love my body and I don't want to compete anymore. And like, I feel like sometimes it's hard for us to listen, but the judges will tell you. And if you listen to them, they will, you know, push you in the right direction.
That's so true. As hard as it can be to listen because you want to just keep going and you think, well, I can make this happen. And for some people, they don't unfortunately have a coach who will tell them, like, yeah, let's listen to the feedback and actually stop. Because I've been in positions where it's like, I definitely should have stopped, but we kept going. And I don't regret it because I got a lot of stage time and experience. But at the same time, like, there is a point where when the judge looks at you and tells you like you're young, you look like you don't have any muscle, like you need to grow, you have the shape but we need more, like you can't do that in 2 months off.
Yes. And I completely agree. And that's what Sandy said. Her words were actually, she used the word, I needed to mature. I was 26 at the time. Angelica had won the show I was in at the Naples Pro. And she's like, listen, you're right there, but like there's a big gap between 6th place and 1st place. And that involves a lot of development and a lot of time not competing. And unless you have that background of, you know, some pro athletes, they were like gymnasts or something where they have the development from when they were 13. I was a ballet dancer. I was lanky and, you know, thin, and I didn't have the development I needed. And so I definitely think just listening to that, because it can save you a lot of time in the long run if you're willing to take the time off you need when you need it.
Definitely. And the funny thing is, you do have to love this process because you can do that and step on stage 2 years later, a year and a half later, and they'll say the same thing. And you're like, okay, I'm bigger, but I'm not big enough still.
Yes, and I'm very guilty of that because I know for years at national, Sandy's like hamstrings, 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 hamstrings. I'm like, oh, this is so annoying. Like every show. Then when I turned pro, like there were hamstrings. They were like big hamstrings. And it's like I was like known for my hamstrings. And I'm like so glad that she kept telling me that because I know when I'm sending client feedback, I always reiterate these are our goals. And they'll be like, my core still isn't there, or like my shoulders still aren't there. I said, no, it's been 6 months. Like this is, I'm going to keep giving you this input. And it's like, just to be redundant about it, it's like you hear it over and over again, but it really just does take time. And I just like to reiterate what we're doing, even though it gets redundant because a
Yeah,
lot of us things we all pretty much most bikini competitors need upper glute. There's a lot of things you hear over and over again.
so true. Like you as a coach with plenty of time and experience working with so many athletes, and then also as a competitor yourself, you are you know what the judges are going to say, but also what they're looking for. And yes, some athletes have like a history in a sport. I had a history in volleyball. So when I got feedback from Joe, he was like, your legs are dense and they're there, but he's like, look at your upper body, you know? And I'm like, okay, like that makes sense. And I've learned over time what the judges mean when they say certain things, but I can imagine for you, 13 years as a coach, 45 shows, that's a lot of time. So, what have been some of the lessons you learned personally that actually affect how you approach coaching?
So actually, when I was trying to turn pro, I didn't have any guidance. I was actually already coaching myself, and I turned someone pro before I turned pro. So if that tells you a little bit about my genetics, I'm like very, very narrow. I'm like 29, 29. And like in bikini to have shape, like generally you need more lats, more glutes because I didn't have a shape. I was a little straight up and down. Um, but I'm trying to think. So as far as when I competed, what I learned the most was sometimes like the small tweaks I made, like from me not going pro to going pro, I got ninth place at Junior USA's. And I looked at the photos and I started comparing to the girl that won. And I was like, this actually isn't anything with my body anymore. Like my pose is wrong and my suit's wrong and my hair looks horrible. And I went back to junior nationals 2 weeks later and won my pro card in a class that was twice as big. So all the girls that placed above me, I suddenly beat just because I paid attention to those like very tiny details, which I'm sure you've heard about like with me coaching or Janelle coaching. I'm very hands-on. I'm the person that brings all the suits in a suitcase and brings the tanner and like I fix things like on the spot. I'm very, very hands-on because bikini is really an overall package. And I know for me, if I'd had some direction, I wouldn't have had to go to 18 shows to turn pro. Like that wouldn't have had to happen if someone was like, this is wrong. Like what you're doing is like not right. But instead I kind of learned by error. And bless my clients that worked with me at the beginning. Like it was the same thing. I was really learning with them.
Yeah.
And they do that too. And some of them became some of my closest friends. I was just maid of honor at one of their weddings.
Oh,
But it's just so funny. Eventually they all turned pro. It's just like, it was a learning process. I had to go, you look great. And then you get last call out. I'm like, oh man, I don't know what I'm doing.
yeah. I was
And
just
I'm just
talking to
grateful they stayed with me.
exactly. Literally, there's so many coaches who end up being incredible coaches, but everyone has to start somewhere. And when you get that opportunity to take on an athlete and coach them, you're learning for yourself, but also for them. I actually think sometimes that is a weird thing in this sport as an athlete, where it's like if I stick with my coach and I give them more time, but I'm not getting where I want to go, but they're learning about me, should I stick with them versus, I kind of want to switch coaches even though I'm doing well with this coach. It's that push and pull sometimes in this industry because when you start with a new coach, they're relearning so much about you, but you're also gaining so much perspective. So, what are some of the things that you, as a coach who has worked with clients for sometimes up to almost a decade, what are the things that maybe you've learned from having athletes for that long versus when you've had athletes for maybe a short period of time?
So when you have an athlete for a short amount of time, one, that athlete is not giving you a chance to really learn their body. And two, like as a coach, you're not really learning about them because in order to really learn someone's body, you have to go through a prep, go through a reverse. Like I have to see them on stage and like be able to like depict stage pictures because sometimes I think girls look great when they're sending me check-in photos and then we get to a show and they get compared in their class to everyone else. And I'm like, you're tiny. like, or you're huge. Like, it's like you don't know until you actually like can compare everything and see them and make those adjustments. And I feel like some people just aren't as patient. They're looking for a coach to solve that problem of, well, if I switch, this person can turn me pro faster, when really that's not the case. Sometimes you're almost setting yourself back, because I have clients now that are signing up this year that I almost turned pro and did turn pro in 2018, 2019. They went to different coaches and they're just circling right back. Like, you knew my body the best. You paid attention to like what worked and what didn't work. And so I always urge athletes, like pay attention to, is this coach really not a good fit, or are you just not being patient with the process? Because it is the sport of bodybuilding. It takes time. And I feel like I never like sugarcoat to people like their first year with me. I have had girls turn pro their second show. That is not the norm though. The norm is that you go there, you get your feet wet, you get scared to death on stage, and you realize, man, I have a lot to work on. So it just
Yeah.
takes, so there, I mean, again, like I think all coaches have their own value and like they do bring something to the table. It's just a matter of like, even your journey may change. You may have someone that's a really great local coach. You win a regional, now you're going to nationals and you're not doing well. And your coach really isn't giving you the advisory for the national stage. So it's almost like knowing, okay, is it time to switch because I've outgrown this coach? Or, because that does happen too. So I feel like it's just paying attention to that. Where are you at in your journey? What is your coach? Where's your coach at in their journey as a coach? And what are they able to offer you?
So true. There were some times in my own experience where I was like, I feel like I'm more invested in my progression than my coach at the time was. And I was like really bummed about that. And then there was another time, my very, very first coach, who that was just a cool first experience, but I didn't know what I didn't know. And then you just keep progressing and then you're like, oh, okay. And then I've always been very loyal with my coaches. And because of that, I think I've made progress. But there was a time where I'm like, oh, I want it like this much. And they
Yeah.
maybe I'm only feeling they want it this much. And sometimes and some athletes don't care how much their coach wants it for them. I'm personally like, I gotta know you're in this with me. Like, cause when we're in
Yeah.
the trenches, I don't need you to sugarcoat and like pat me on the back. I already know I'm doing what I need to do. But also I don't want you to be like not not as invested, I guess you could say.
Yes, and I'm very guilty of overinvesting. So my mentor is Kim Odo. I think for probably 10 years straight, I would always sit next to an auditoriums and like try and pick his brain. And
Yes.
I'm like, you've been doing this longer than me. What would your tip of the year be for me this year? Um, and something with that, with him doing this forever, is he told me that I can never be more invested in an athlete than they're invested. And I found myself getting very emotional because I want it so bad for someone, but they're not following the plan, or they're not showing up on time, or and he's like, you've got to care as much as they care. Like, if they're not bringing 100%, you've got to give them what they're bringing, because if you put too much energy into that, it's just going to drain you, and then you have nothing to give to your people that are willing to give 100%. So it's like I've had to learn the hard way to, like, you give what's worthy of being given, not just because I just see the potential and I get so excited by it. And he's like,
Yes.
whoa, Horsey, like, take it back. You don't know what's going to happen. And he's so
Yeah.
right. Like, I've done the craziest thing. Like, I've flown cross country. I put someone in my own suit, and I've like literally done pro bono preps when I was first starting. Like, I was just so over the top. I just wanted to like
Yeah.
help people that I thought could do well. And some of them worked out, and some of them it was like, well, that definitely didn't work out at all like I expected. They gave up after one show.
Yeah, so true. Kim is such a great example of someone in the industry who is always willing to help as well. Like, I've never gotten the sense that he isn't willing to provide support to other coaches too, or other athletes. He has a very nice energy about him. And I think that's really great that you as a coach too can sit next to another coach and be like, hey, let's learn from each other versus
Yeah.
being like high and mighty about it?
Because at the end of the day, I mean, eventually, like, most people don't stay with one coach for a decade. They change coaches. They want to see a different perspective, a different theory. And I feel like having that like respect for other coaches and knowing we're all here in the same like playing field, we might as well get along and support each other. Like, one of my clients went to Atlas. Me and Atlas sat down, had sushi, and we talked about it. He's like, you did a great job with her. And he's like, this is kind of my plan. Like, what do you think? Like, we just sit down and we talk about things versus I don't know, being against each other, because I'm totally supportive. When she's like, I want to go to James, I'm like, great. Like, I hope it like works out great for you. Like, he's a really nice guy. And I don't understand when people can't be like that. It just makes it like a less fun environment. I think like something Odo recognized in me is like, I just like to have fun. Like, even though we're at work and we're doing a job, it's like at the end of the day, if we're always at shows, they might as well be fun. You might as well enjoy the people you're with and get to know them.
Exactly. Like you hear a lot in the industry, and I'm not going to say too much like through this, but I think we can both agree there's things you're going to hear that could cloud your judgment or cloud your perception of someone. But when you actually like sit down and have a conversation with them or you take the time with them, you get a different perspective than maybe what has been shared. And I think that's true in any industry, really. So to be able to just enjoy it. And this is a small community and people change in this community. Like bodybuilding has attracted so many people with problems, let's be real. So then you
Yeah.
grow through it so much. And like I've seen you at shows since I was competing. I think the first time I saw you at a show was probably 2018 when I got back in, or 2017, 2018 when I got back into the sport. So I've seen you at shows all these years, and then it's like I've seen Kim at pretty much every show I've ever done. I'm like, are you everywhere all at once? You know what I'm saying? I'm like, I remember it was 2020. I'm on stage at a show where no one's in the audience, and there's Kim, and I'm like, huh? Like, it's like he's just there. And then there's other coaches too that I could list off a million of them who you will see all the time for athletes. It's like so we can have that really positive experience and uplift each other, not being fake and like you got to be everybody's friend. I don't believe in that either, like, but being cordial and nice and recognizing people evolve, I think is so important to the humanity of it.
Yeah, and also recognizing that certain people just aren't a fit, and it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them or you. It's just not a fit. And to put things into like a weird perspective for other people, if people are trying to perceive something like in a negative way, it's also like that experience is a reflection of how they felt about it, but not necessarily how the experience actually was. Like everything is as we see it, like it's as we are. And so it's just I've learned so much, and I feel like even with having coaches, I found the coach that works best with me and our visions align. Like me and Janelle, we work together seamlessly. Like, and there's no drama, and it's just the way I like it, because there can be a lot of drama in the industry, and me and her both have very similar points with like we don't believe all of our business is just going to come from social media and come from trying to pull people from other teams. Like we want to organically like build our business. We're not going to be the biggest team. We never are. We're just going to have the clients that we love, that we work best with, that want to work with us. And I feel like it takes a lot to get to that point. And I hate to see when other like teams are going through any sort of like turbulence or like drama online. Like I understand what that's like. So it's like I feel for them. But it's hard being a business owner, and it happens I think in other businesses, but with ours everything's publicized on social media. So it's a very different, like, if someone gets let go from Target, like you're not like, oh, Target sucks.
Exactly.
You're like, that's a business that had to make a decision about something, and like there's like no bad blood. But like in our industry, it's like making a decision for your business like comes on people personally, and it's very, very interesting how like that's perceived.
So you've kind of talked about some of the emotional toll of coaching, but I want to hear more of like that mental, physical, emotional toll it takes and how you handle it, especially when you are running a team and you've had different phases of your business with growth or with change. So what's that toll and how do you manage it?
So I didn't manage it well prior. There's a lot of demand when you have clients or staff, and you're expected to pretty much always be there, whether it's 4 a.m, whether it's midnight. If there's an emergency, like you're expected to be present. As a human being, I don't like being on my phone all the time. I don't like being like on social media all the time. And I really got caught in the trap of I was trying to please everyone so much that I literally ran my health into the ground. Like I just stopped. I pretty much was sleeping a couple hours a night. Like when I knew that my people in Tokyo weren't awake, or like my people in California weren't awake. And I really I literally made myself sick. Like I was on my way to junior nationals and got hospitalized. And it really like, I was in the hospital once, like, I think the next day I woke up in ICU, and I was in, Sandy was there, Joe Pashkol was there. Everyone was so nice. Like they were all there to like be supportive. I was so upset I couldn't make it to the show, and there was like obviously no way I could make it. But I had my laptop open, and my doctor came in. He's like, "We've got to talk. Like this is a problem. Like you got put in ICU, and you're on your laptop." And it's like that. I felt so bad. Like I was trying to adjust plans for like the show the next day, and like he's like, "You got to knock it off. Like if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of other people." And my therapist earlier this year used a really good analogy. She said, like, a mother lion like eats first and then feeds her cubs, because the thing is, if she doesn't eat, she can't go kill to bring them back food. And it kind of hit me different when she said that, because I was always putting everyone else before myself. And she's like, if you don't take care of you, you're not going to take care of anyone. And that was one of those really hard moments where I had to change like the way everything was structured that I was doing. And it upset some people, because it's just, I had to take certain days off. I couldn't go to just every show. Like, I think Kimoto's a rock star for going to every show, but like, everyone's body is different. And I think emotionally, I feel like men sometimes can handle their emotions a little better than females. It's like, with my emotions, I really need to have like a little bit of time where I'm not with everyone and I'm not at every show, because it's healthier for me as a person, and I can be a better version of myself when I do show up.
So true. Like, you have to know your threshold essentially. And we can't expect, like, I can't expect to be the way someone else is, and they can't expect to be like me, because we've had different experiences that have led to that. And I appreciate you candidly sharing that experience you had, because the reality is we can get so wrapped up in serving, serving, serving. And when we're trying to grow business too, and it becomes our livelihood, and then we're also emotionally invested, it doesn't surprise me that you'd be in the ICU opening your computer, because that's the habit that got you there anyways.
Yes. And I just kept, every time I got put in the hospital that year before I got put in ICU, they would drain my lungs, they would do something, and I'd be like, okay, well, I'm just going to go to the show tomorrow. And I would just like go and like be coughing and like not be 100%. And I just thought, oh, I just need to push through it. Where in reality, we need to listen to our bodies. And like, that's what I'm preaching to other people. So why would I not take care of I'm telling all my clients to sleep. Why am I
Yeah.
not sleeping? And it's like, it shouldn't be not important just because I'm not getting on stage. Like, all of our health is important. And I think that's when I realized, like, yeah, if I take care of myself, I show up as a better coach and a better person for everyone else. So my mentality's changed a lot. I still reply to all my emails and texts very fast, but it's like, if there's a day where something happens and like I have to like take my dog to like the vet, I don't sit there and panic the whole time and try to reply to people while I'm talking to the vet, because it's like, I used to do that. I used to feel like I can't not do this right at this minute. And what I found is that the people that you want to work with, or the people that work best with you, they understand. And the people that don't, it gradually kind of like they'll disappear and go away and try someone new. And there are coaches that maybe they can handle that threshold and they can do that. And I feel like I found what clients work best for us. And like, that's what we're sticking with. We're not just, taking on anyone and everyone.
Yeah, which is an easy thing to do when you're trying to start or grow your business. And then that gets you in like a kind of a negative habit loop. Like, I remember when I first started, like, I was constantly replying like that all the time. And then I was like, what am I actually doing for them if I'm always on? Because, like, am I really equipping them with what they need to be on for themselves? And that's when I started developing more systems and resources. And I was like, okay, if the end goal is to help them with this, why am I doing this? And but we evolve. And like you said, now this is something that maybe is a bit more controversial, but I would like to hear your take, because you admitted there were some mistakes, there were some ruffled feathers, there's people who say stuff online. How do you manage that when it happens? Because that does feel very threatening when something like that happens.
It really does. And I feel like the best way I could have handled that is by not engaging, for one. Like, when people start doing something like that, to not fuel the fire, because that's really not going to do anything. It also doesn't make you look any better either, because ultimately that person they're feeling some sort of way. And I feel like you have to let people express themselves and not take it personally. Like, that person is going through something that may have nothing to do with you. And so I've tried to like separate myself from it a little bit. And I feel like a lot of us in the fitness industry have been through something like this. But I recently saw one of my friends got blasted for something. And I say a friend, someone I know from years ago in my life. And I saw them get blasted for something. And then I saw how they rebutted it and how it turned into like this huge thing where it's like, you could have just maybe just said you're sorry and like left it alone. And, it would have just fizzled down. But it said it's like 3 weeks later going stronger. And
Yeah.
knowing what our energy is worth, because I know for myself, when I was going through all that, I had already been hospitalized, almost died. And I feel like I knew better than to let that get to me, because that's what got me sick in the first place. I'm like, this is not the most important thing in the world. Like, I love my job and I love what I do and I love these people, but it's like ultimately you can control what you can control, and you can control how you treat people, you can control how you respond to things, and that's all we can do. So again, it's easier said than done. I definitely had days where I was like sad about it, or maybe I cried or something happened, but ultimately it's like letting stuff be, because you can't control it and everything is happening for us, not to us. So like I feel like now looking back, I know that everything happened for a reason. And like it's like respecting that and going like, okay, this had to happen for things to be the way they are now.
Yeah, which that's something every time I make a mistake or maybe I do something I thought was right and then there's a negative reaction, it makes me like question, but really it's like a good time for reflection and understanding. And I try to have a lot of compassion in this industry because it's so easy to like sit behind a computer and read comments or read stories or hear one side and think that's how it is. But it really like if I can learn from mistakes or things, then why can't somebody else? Or if I've been through something difficult and actually became better because of it, why wouldn't I give someone the same grace? And I think um there's boundaries for sure, like if someone's doing something heinous, I'm not gonna be like, well, let's bring them on the podcast anyway, like that's probably not
Yeah.
gonna happen. But if it's like they've grown and or they learn, or maybe we all go through things and we have to learn. And if someone's
Yeah.
used to you being that addicted to work person and then you put a stop to it, of course they're gonna be like adjusting to that themselves.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I've kind of lost my train of thought for a second, but not used to being on podcasts, as you know.
I'm
Um,
glad you're here.
I think the hardest part is like if you're a business owner, you're putting yourself in the line of fire. You're saying people are going to judge me by just like by posting on social media or getting on stage. Like you're asking for criticism and judgment, and so not everyone's going to like you. And I feel like for years, I mean, honestly, I'm proud of how long we've held like staff and clients. Like we've had people for 6, 7 years work for us, be coached with us. Like I feel like that says something alone. Like nothing happens just like that. Like things change, people change, and sometimes relationships change and they don't work anymore. Um, but yeah, I feel like being a business owner, being an entrepreneur, being an athlete, you're in the line of fire, you're asking for the criticism. So you have to take it with a little bit of grace and understand that you're in that position because you're doing well in the first place. So
True.
like it used to hurt my feelings when people would talk about me like in the gym and be like, her butt's fake or like whatever. It used to like, and it's like, why would that hurt my feelings that they think I have implants in my butt? Like that shouldn't hurt my feelings. That should be like a compliment.
Yeah.
And so taking things in a different perspective and not letting things, get to you. Again, easier said than done, especially being a female.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. I was just talking to someone the other day about how like bodybuilding provided me a space to be judged with my permission versus like growing up being bullied for or judged for how I looked or called me names. Bodybuilding gives me an outlet to like grow in the way I actually have chosen to grow and pursue. And I'm not being bullied for it. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
a different approach. Like you said, it's perspective.
Yeah, it really is just perspective. And I think that everyone who's been in this industry, it requires a lot of growing. And I think it's very different than a corporate job. Like I think every job has its own battles. But I think this one it's very different because it's all online and it's just it feels very personal. And that's where I had to remove myself a little bit and be like, okay, there's Casey the person and there's Casey that coaches bikini competitors and owns this company. And like I still have like you still go home to the same house, the same family, the same dog. Like so as much as like that stuff may feel like, oh, this feels like the end of the world, time heals everything, everything passes, like, and it really whoever can stay long term and like show their worth over time, like that's what matters. It's not all the little stuff that happens and the hiccups, because everyone has hiccups. And to say that nothing will ever happen again, I don't know that. Like I have no idea. It's like there are things you can do to take precaution, but at the end of the day it's like you just do your best, you show up as your best, and you let everything else fall how it's going to fall. Because even Odo went through something, like he went through very hard times when he started coaching, and he's just learned over the years how to navigate things differently, and that's what I'm learning.
Exactly. Like you're in that phase. And I've had the pleasure of connecting with other coaches through the series or at shows or at events. And like I get so much perspective and it helps me realize like I'm not the only one who thinks this is like a tiny bubble. So then everything that happens in the tiny bubble feels so massive when in reality it's not all that we are, right? Like you said, you're Casey and you're also a coach. So there's different parts of you. Now, while we're talking about teams, growing businesses, coaching, and having that respect for everybody too, what do you have to say to the people who say politics with teams plays a role in placings or that all of this is just political?
So we actually had a chapter on this in the Bikini Bible, or like a section at least called politics, schmolitics, because I feel like politics is an easy way for people to like almost say like, well, I didn't win because of this versus saying, what do I need to improve on? Because I could never look at an athlete that didn't place the way they want or didn't win and say they should have. Like, if you really look at it, it's a subjective sport. So you have to consider every person's eyes are different, everyone's view is different. But if you're really to be honest, is there nothing you could improve on that would have made you place better? Because at the end of the day, it is a psychological sport. So let's say you're a pro and you've competed 50 times and you've won 4 Olympias and you get on stage with that person and you're a novice, pro competitor, they're probably going to think the girl that won Olympia should probably be in the first call out. And you may have to kind of fight your way there, but that's not because, you don't deserve to be there or, you could have a better physique than her possibly. But like at the end of the day, it is a psychological sport as well because we're being judged by humans. We're not being judged on a metric. It's not how fast are you doing the mile. So you have to keep that in perspective that like as humans, some people prefer like blondes over brunettes.
Yeah.
And it's like with you have to think like that too. Now, granted, you're being based on like a decision with 8 or 9 different judges, not just one. So it's like it's a little more fair in that sense. But at the end of the day, you have to keep in mind that like they're still human. And like if you saw someone's face, like there's been studies that have proved the more you see someone or the more like you see their face, the more attractive you think they are, even if it's complete strangers. So like you have to think that comes into effect if you see people on stage and I've seen this girl every single weekend, like get her in the first call out. Like I like recognize her and we're drawn to things we recognize. So I think that that's just part of actually growing in the sport and putting your dues in and paying your time because you will be that person they recognize it. And it doesn't mean you have to show up all at once. It means maybe for 5 years you've been competing and do 2 shows a year.
I really
They don't forget.
yeah, absolutely. And I found that there are so many of all the shows that I've done and over time, like it wasn't immediate that judges started recognizing me off the stage. I did so many shows, and that was like, they probably were tired of seeing me. They're like, this girl again, you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it's true though. Like, it's not to say someone who's never been on stage before can't be successful. Like you said, there's some who you've turned pro in like 2 shows, and then there's some who hit the scene and they do amazing. Like I just spoke with a woman from the Dominican Republic this past weekend, and she literally came to America and then she progressed to becoming a pro. And it's like she wasn't working with a big team. She wasn't known. It was just something she decided to pursue. And I think they do such a good job of protecting the landscape for competitors because they know how hard we work that they want to hold us to a high standard and they want to hold the industry to that standard.
Yes. And only you can change for you. So it's like people think maybe if I'm associated with this team, like, like you said, like a big team, it will help something. It really is about you as an individual and you and your sportsmanship and your physique. Like if you're undeniable, you're not going to not go to Olympia. Like when I was first starting to coach pros, I had girls go to Olympia because like, and I mean, it's like, it's been harder for me to get girls to go to Olympia, the more connections I've had. And it's not because like, it's the sport's just gotten more challenging and the physiques just keep getting better. But if you're undeniable, if you have great sportsmanship, if you're a nice person to talk to, like people are going to be drawn to you and people are going to want you to do well. And that has nothing to do with anyone else in your corner. That's like you as a person and who you are. So I definitely, to some extent, I guess there's politics and everything, but I don't think that's why people place the way they place.
I like that emphasis on the taking responsibility, going to the drawing board and resolving what needs to be resolved.
Yeah, because even when I turned pro, Sandy had always seen me with blonde hair, and that show I wore a wig. My hair, I had destroyed it. I fried it. I had a wig on. It was like a dark brown wig, and she had moved me dead center and then told me to exit the stage. I ran into her in the back hallway in like my normal clothes, and she's like, "When are you going to compete again?" And I was like, "I just did." And she goes, "Oh, how did you do?" And I was
Oh my
like, "Oh."
God.
And I was like, I think you have me winning. She's like, oh, that's good. And I'm like, it's like she just didn't recognize me with like my wig on. It was like no correlation.
That's so funny. I could see that too. And also when there's so many people on stage, like I know when I've gone to shows, I'm looking at their physiques, you know?
Mhm.
So then I'm like, oh wait, yeah, if they're walking out, maybe I like recognize the person, you know? But usually like when you are going through that, everyone's looking at the physique and then they realize like, oh yeah, you're that person with this, and then you ended up looking better. Like that's cool when it comes time for feedback.
100%. So yeah, definitely. I think it's like taking responsibility and just like owning it, because it's like whatever progress you want to make and what you want to bring, that's going to dictate how you do.
Love that. So, what are some of the common misconceptions people have about this sport when they come to you?
Oh, I would say that they think it's maybe easier or faster than it is.
Mm.
Um, I feel like they expect progress faster. Like they expect their body to move faster than it took them to get in the place they are now. Like if someone comes to you and they're overweight, like it took 2 years for your body to get like this. You can't expect in 2 weeks to have all this gone. So I feel like that's the biggest misconception that I run into.
I think social media helps to perpetuate that perception.
Yeah, I would feel like that's some of the biggest hindrance I see in athletes is they go online and they compare themselves to other people, and they're comparing their year 1 to someone's year 10, or even their year 10 to someone else's year 10 with two completely different bodies and
Yeah.
lifestyles. I'm like, wait, you are not that person. We can't compare you to her. And it's easy to do that and to get into that trap, but we each are so different. And I think it's respecting yourself and knowing like, okay, there are things I can improve on, and making those improvements, the consistency of making improvements every year, year after year, that's what's going to bring you a better and better package. Comparing to others, like winners focus on winning and losers focus on winners. And like,
Mhm.
so I feel like, if you focus on yourself and you focus on improving yourself, you're going to see results.
That's such a great quote. I like that a lot. And that I think it speaks volumes because if you do focus on who's winning, you're probably gonna do things you're not even comfortable with or ready for in your journey too, and it could just set you back even further.
Yeah, because like I said, I did have a couple girls go pro right off the bat that people were very envious of that mentally could not handle it. And they ended up actually losing all their progress in probably 4 weeks after they turned pro. So it's like, it's scary to see all these different sides of like, yes, you can achieve it fast, but can you maintain it?
Right. Yeah, that's so true. And as an athlete, you're in a vulnerable position. So that's part of why I do the coaches series, although it's been something I've gotten a lot of flack for as well as a lot of excitement about. Like it's like a combination of the two. But like one of the reasons I do it is because I want athletes to be able to see like they can have these open conversations with coaches and hopefully have a realistic perspective and view and seek out a coach that wants them to be successful and not just get there fast to make them the coach look better.
Yeah, 100%.
I think your camera like
I, I'm
switched.
I'm getting a call, so I
I
feel like that's
was too, literally at the same time. I'm like, why is somebody calling me right now? And I'm on Do Not Disturb. I'm like, that shouldn't be happening. So yeah. So anyway, I want to ask you some hypothetical questions. And I
okay.
know these are difficult because there's so much nuance, as you said in the beginning. So if I'm 1 year into competing, but I'm doing really well, I've got a few overall wins already. And my goal is now to get my pro card, but I've not yet stepped on the national stage. And I've been working with the same coach for all of these shows so far, but I was looking for a new approach. Why would I hire you?
Oh, interesting. If you were looking for a new approach, it depends. Maybe I have the same approach as the coach you had. So that's definitely but I would say if that was like your question about coming to me for a national show, it's like I really like our team really specializes in the national stage and specifically bikini. And then Janelle does wellness. So it's like we really specialize in these divisions and we do know inside and out like what they're looking for, and also be able to like kind of direct you in like what show would be the best like for where your physique is, because for some people starting out at junior USA's is like a great move, and for other people they need to wait till later in the year. And I think it's really just having that experience of being on the national circuit by going to these shows for over a decade and paying attention to like what works and what doesn't work. I'm not going to let someone step on the national stage that I do not think has a shot of getting their pro card unless they tell me specifically they are going in to not get their pro card and they just want the experience. I have had that happen. The athletes still did well, but if you look on our website, I actually guarantee if you sign up with us that you will place a certain way. If you buy a premium package, if you don't place top 5, I prep you free the next time. If I send you to nationals, say you're ready, and then you don't do well, that's on me, not on you. And that is if you actually followed everything.
Yeah,
you
of
know,
course.
like not if you fell off your diet and didn't do your cardio and like, but if I give you the okay, like that's something I can feel very confident. And like obviously with guaranteeing, there's a chance that you won't and you could have a great physique, but we're that confident in knowing what to bring to the national stage and knowing how to tie the package together, even if it's making minor adjustments to your suit, to your posing, because all of that is included with our team too, versus having like we send someone else somewhere for posing. Like we take care of everything.
Yeah, why do you think it's an advantage to get everything in one place?
I think it's because some people honestly, like I know that as a beginner myself, like I didn't prioritize posing. And I feel like to have to pay extra when you're already paying for a prep and all this stuff, are you really going to pay extra to go get posing? Are you going to be consistent with it? Our posing coaches make our clients send video check-ins and not like once a month, like every week. Like they have to check in, they have to send videos, and they're getting constant critiques even when they're not actually in posing sessions. I feel like it holds the athlete accountable on all accounts. And then I even ask them, hair and makeup, what do you like? This is what I envision for you. And we talk about that all in advance and we help you like, prepare and get ready for that. I just think it's really important in the bikini division. It's easy to like let something slide because I don't want someone that has a great body to not go pro because their posing is not the best for their physique.
Well, because you said you experienced that yourself.
I did. Yeah. And it was so drastic for me. It was like ninth to turning pro. And I feel like no one else should have to spend an extra $2,000 because they didn't know how to hit a front pose.
Man, and the national shows are expensive. Like you brought up the financial part earlier. Like I think it's great. It's a great experience, but once you get that experience and you see its impact on your bank account, you're like, I can wait till I'm more ready, and that'll be just fine with me.
Yes. And you definitely like, again, that's why I think just having someone that caters to that, you're not going to waste as much money if they really know that circuit. Like we're at every national show, we're there, we're in the trenches. Like I'm going to make sure, like if you pay that money to get there, your tan, your suit, your posing, like we are going to make sure everything, there's nothing left to chance. And then obviously you have to bring your best, but like we're making sure that everything else is where it needs to be. So you don't have to stress about that because I know national shows being much bigger than regionals, they can be stressful when you're having to coordinate hair and makeup and then makeup artists get behind. It can feel very, very stressful, but to have a coach that's there that can kind of guide you through that process, I feel like is helpful.
Yeah, so true. Okay, so this might be a concern that comes up. So this is another hypothetical. If I'm 4 weeks out from a show and I keep saying that I don't feel ready, but you believe that I am, what's your response?
If you don't believe you're ready,
Yeah.
I if I know that you're ready, I'm going to tell you that I would not send you into the show if I didn't think you could win. Now, you not feeling ready is something and you mentally like you aren't confident. And that's actually a whole other thing we'd have to work on. So possibly you're not going to do the show because if you're not confident, that's something that like internally you're going to reflect that when you get on stage. So I need athletes to feel confident before I push them onto stage.
Ooh.
Sometimes you need a little push, but I mean, for something like if it was a national show and you're telling me I just don't feel some sort of way, I could try and convince you. But if that doesn't work, if I can't really make you feel like I wouldn't have you do this if I didn't think you could win because I'm competitive. It's bad. To me, it's like I failed if you don't do well. So
Yeah.
it's like, and I don't want to fail. But if you don't feel confident, like that's something we have to work on in itself.
So true. I really like that perspective. Like sometimes that actually requires a step back because they hired you, they trust you, you're telling them you're good to go. And I guarantee you if you don't do well, like I got you on the next one and they're still doubting it, that would definitely I could see that requiring a step back.
Yes, yes. And I definitely think that like I feel like people really do when they hire a coach, they generally trust you. So I don't really run into the issue too much of, me telling them something and then going, no, I'm just gonna, I feel this way. So people are pretty good listeners, especially if they're like trusting you, which after working with someone for 6 months or however long, like that trust should be there to like trust them to take the leap and get on stage.
Definitely. So now let's say someone comes to you wanting to compete or considering competing. What's something you would want them to know before they actually compete?
before they compete, what's required. So like following, some sort of plan, whether it's macros, whether it's structured, like how often they're going to be able to eat out or drink, how often they need to be able to train consistently, the finances that go into competing. I know that Janelle actually wrote up a budget sheet for clients to see what it would cost to go to a regional show, national show. And I feel like that's important to address. So they know going in what's required and they're not thinking, oh, like I'm just going to prep and then get on stage and it's going to cost me $200.
Oh my gosh. There'd be so many more competitors with it there. It's wild. Like when you do break that down, I actually love that she made that budget sheet. That's so cool to hear. I feel like that's such an invaluable resource because you don't know until you know, or someone like points it out and like breaks it down, and you can watch all the videos on things to know before your first competition and you can hear people say it's expensive, but when you put it on, I think it's important to actually write it down on paper because then you're outlining it for yourself in your own life. And I think all too often people use competing as an escape from other things in their life and they're willing to go into debt for it. And that's
Yeah.
not generally the best approach.
Yes, I've had clients that have like sent me some red flag texts or emails like, I'm just going to put everything on my credit card. And I was like, let's not compete. Let's wait.
You're like, and
Such,
pay it off next month just for points, hopefully.
we've literally had clients tell us that where it's like, this is just not the right time. Like focus on getting your finances in order and then think about competing because like, you're not going to go into this and come out making money. Even if you turn pro, you don't walk in broke and leave with a huge check. You leave with less money because you just competed.
Yeah,
And
and
then
potentially like 4 times.
then you have to pay,
Yes.
then you have to pay to go to your pro shows. And it's like I feel like there is this misconception that like, oh, like all my problems will be solved if I turn pro. I'm like, no. You can get a sponsorship before you're pro if you really want to take this route. Like it's not about being a pro, it's about being an athlete that people respect and trust.
Oh, yeah. I love that educational side. Like your experience in the sport as an athlete allows you to equip people who come to you with that knowledge as well. Like I know that this podcast has granted me opportunities that I probably wouldn't have had just competing. And it was because I have this passion for the sport that I'm able to maybe use the platform in a different way. And oftentimes, like, there is a misconception, I think, that you will enter the sport and like you'll get sponsors, you'll get money, you'll have people. There are Olympian level athletes who can't even get a sponsor to fly them their to the Olympia or to their shows. So it's not it's definitely not common necessarily to just turn pro and all of us. I mean, you'll hear people get sponsors like an affiliate code or something, but you're not generally seeing them get maybe a salary without some other influence.
Yeah. And being someone that was a salaried athlete, I got those salaries before I ever turned pro. And it was because, I was very active on social media before Instagram really blew up and everything like that. And like there are contracts like that, but it's not anything about being an athlete or competing on stage for most of the companies. Now, I'm not speaking for tanning or suit companies, but if you're talking about supplement companies, like they're catering to the masses and they don't really care about you competing. Like, not that they don't care about your own success, but like that doesn't actually add value for them. So you have to think about that as well. Like, what value am I going to add to this company? Because you competing is just an extra cost for them. But there are still paid sponsorships. They're just few and far between. So
Yeah.
it's a lot. And some of the highest paid people, like, back in the day, Paige Hathaway, now she has her own company, but like she was a sponsored athlete that made a lot of money and she was not a competitor. She competed once in Oklahoma.
Yeah, and I remember I think she had like handed out like her competition card. She went around an expo and handed out like images of herself and like a little breakdown to try to get those sponsors. Like that was her grassroots efforts. And so we still have to do that now. It just looks different. And I think the
Mm-hmm.
industry saw so many people fall in love with fitness that now it's easier to just take on affiliates that they don't have to pay athletes.
Mm-hmm.
So in some ways, we kind of lowered or maybe devalued ourselves because we were willing to do things for free or for exchange for certain stuff that in the past it was harder to get an athlete, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it's like when someone is signing their life away and they're telling me they're getting free supplements and a code, I'm like, no, you aren't. That is not worth signing anything away. Because then if you ever do get a real offer, you're trapped in this, non-compete and you're not actually a sponsored athlete. And I've always reviewed those contracts for my clients because everything's negotiable. I remember when a supplement company, it was actually Paige's, I think before she technically owned it, Live Body came to me. I met Paige, we got along. She referred me to Live Body. And they
Yeah.
sent me and I really don't like posting on Instagram. So if you know me, for me to post for you, like it has to be so worth it. Like I don't want to just make content and post.
Mm-hmm.
And they offered me this number and I was like, no, that's not going to work for me. I had a different number in mind. They're like, what's your number in mind? I gave it to them like, we can do that. And that was probably the fourth time I had a company. BPI was the same way. They all like when you tell them that's not my number, they're like, well, what is your number? And I've never had them say no. And I'm like, I'm not asking for enough. So these companies sometimes do have money, but it just depends. I feel like it has changed a lot because when people are willing to do things for free, why would they pay anyone now?
Exactly. Yeah, it's been such a weird thing watching the industry change in that way. And I like how you, as a woman, were able to advocate for yourself too and negotiate because that's generally not, what women do. So that's awesome that you did. And also that you're helping your clients do that. I personally find like when I was first into this, I was like, I'll take whatever. I think that would be so cool. Like I just want to have supplements covered and like but I didn't have any influence really back then. But now that
Yeah.
I have more and I'm like more mindful, I'm like, if it doesn't fit into my life, like I'm not actually using it. I never promoted anything I didn't actually use, but I didn't start using something because it came to me. Now it's like if I'm using it, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's a complicated thing because it sounds attractive and appealing and they make it attractive and appealing. But if it requires you to like, if you have three companies you're posting 4 times a week for, how are you building your own brand?
Yes, 100%. And I mean, that's all it's about. It's like if you're more valuable as a person, people are going to find that value in you and respect it. But if you don't value yourself, how is anyone else going to value you?
Oh, yeah. Well, and then from a business perspective, it's like actually coming up with that and having a rate card and having things that you're going to do. Like I got offered to do ads on this podcast for companies I won't mention because they should pay for that spot, but um, but I was like, I don't like this deal. Like I'm actually surprised people do this deal because I don't think it aligns with my audience and I would rather promote my own stuff and I've had people tell me like you need to be monetizing everything more and I'm like, but what does that sacrifice and like what does that take away from? So I appreciate that you have obviously had those experiences and you can talk about it here because I actually haven't really had that conversation on this podcast. And I think it's an important one because it's so prevalent now. There's always an opportunity.
Yes. And again, I know the contracts have changed a lot since I stopped having sponsorships. And I chose to not have sponsorships because, like, kind of like you, it didn't align no matter how much they were paying me. I know I don't have a number for it now. I don't want to promote a product that way. Like, there are certain things I love that I use, and I will hand refer to each client, each friend, but like, I'm not going to like necessarily post about it because I feel like for me, it doesn't mesh with who I am or like what I want to promote to the world or like my brand as a person. So that's where like you have to value yourself enough to know, okay, like what what do I want to project to the world? And I know for me, it's like it's coaching and like I want to coach and I want to be a great coach. And I don't necessarily want to promote supplements, even though I could.
Totally. Yeah, I get that. Like I have some different companies that I connect with and that I'm affiliated with and I'm proud of that. And then there's other companies that come to me and I'm like, it's too much. I got enough to manage. And I think that if the company was right and the connection was right and it was genuine, that's always worth considering. And it goes back to like, how do you want to represent yourself? And um, young me maybe would have taken an opportunity just because it was presented. Now me is like, maybe take the opportunity, but here are my like non-negotiables for it.
Yes. And I've even made the mistake of like giving out information for free before I had a signed contract. Like, oh, like, do you have all like the names and, names of the people you coach or like whatever? And sending someone like how they knew how many clients I had or how many we had as a team. And then there was nothing like in writing that was good enough for me to want to sign with them. Like, wow, I've disclosed all this information. And now it's like, I don't want to move forward with them and I don't trust them anymore. And it's like, okay, like actually know what you're getting into before you just give away all your like information or anything like that.
That's such a great point. Oh my gosh. Yeah. The lessons I've learned, and I don't regret anything I've promoted, but I've definitely learned along the way of like, what is worth my time or what's not. So, okay, next hypothetical. Your client comes to you and they say they have rebounded after their show and they just want to reverse it and get back to normal. What do you do now?
So if they left and they missed the most crucial time, which is right after your show, they've already rebounded because that is the most important time. Our metabolisms are very, very fragile after a show. And that's why I always stress the first 2 weeks, the first month, that is your most, that's when you have to be on it. After that, if you want to get sloppy, it won't be as bad. But if you've already rebounded, the issue we're going to have is like your metabolism already is going, whoa, I have no idea what's going on. All I would do at that point is get you consistent again, not underfeed you, not overfeed you. It would just have to be consistent. Get your body back to like a level where it understands what's coming in and out each day. Cause you went from maybe like having your water pulled, being depleted to like suddenly you're gorging on pizza and donuts and your body has no regularity. So I would get back that regular system first. And then, from that point, depending on how your body responds, we may need to like, depending on how much you rebound, we may need to cut some of your body fat because your metabolism isn't going to be working optimally if you have a bunch of excess body fat. So the more lean tissue you have, the more calories you burn. But it's like, ultimately, I'm not going to take someone who already like bulked in a sense or like rebounded and just add food. That's just asking for the prep from hell next time.
Yeah, and I guess similarly then because you're fragile, like you can't necessarily go straight into, like you said, you wouldn't also then just drop calories.
No, because that could also damage your metabolism more. And because you've already had this extreme, your body just needs a little bit of balance and like regularity. And then we can see how your body responds, see how much damage is done. Because if your body blew up, depending on how fast that was, like there's already some underlying problems. So you just don't want to like fuel the fire anymore. And that's very hard because when someone comes to you that is rebounded, they're finally disgusted. They want you to put them on 2 hours of cardio and they're willing to starve, but that's
Exactly.
getting them into this trap in the first place is the extremes.
Exactly. I get that. One of my biggest pet peeves is when I hear a girl come to me, they're like applying for my food relationship program, and then they're like, "Hey, I ended up deciding to just start a prep with my coach again." I'm like, why? Like that doesn't make any like this is gonna I'm gonna talk to you in a year. Maybe sooner because this is I don't tell them that, but that's the truth. Like that's generally what happens. And then they do it and they wish that they had started sooner. Just like if you were to just put a girl straight on a cut just so she would feel more comfortable after that, that's gonna likely repeat the cycle more than helping this person actually find like that gray area to exist in.
Yeah, because they already have food issues to begin with if that happens. So it's like you have to kind of like work delicately with that. And if someone has, in the past, when I've had girls that have issues with overeating or binging, what you do with that is you increase their daily food. You give them more nutrition. You don't take away food. You go, okay, if we add 200 calories, are you able to stick to this? Because you have to have a plan you can stick to. Like if I just cut their food, it's gonna be even worse. They're gonna have worse.
Exactly.
They're gonna be more restrictive. So it's like you have to have that sort of mindset, and it can't be a rush to like I have to get lean to get on stage. It's like no. There are always shows. There's no rush for anything. Right now, we have to get your body in a place where it can respond when we start cutting food.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I have so much respect for that approach because that's how it really should be done. And I think, again, I'll use the word vulnerable, but I think when you're in a vulnerable position, there are some people who will capitalize on that and take you where you want to go just to make you more comfortable. But when you have been in it long enough and you've experienced enough of that, you see it doesn't capitalize on anything. It just runs you further down.
And creates more like long-term issues.
Mm-hmm. So I want to do the rapid fire round. Now, I'll be honest, no one's done this rapidly. So if you want to explain any piece of it, you're more than welcome to. Generally, like one sentence or less. And then if there's one that you're like, I really want to expand on that, or a couple you really want to expand on, we can definitely go back and do that.
Okay.
Cool. So do you believe in using waist trainers?
No.
And are you a fan of if it fits your macros approach or more like a structured meal plan?
Both, depends on the client.
And do you believe in fasted cardio?
No.
Are you a
Depending on if we're stripping muscle.
okay. Oh, that's interesting, actually. I kind of want to hear you expand on that more.
So if we have someone that has a lot of leg muscle and they want to be in bikini, but their quads are too big, yeah, fasted cardio, I'll starve the muscle. But for most bikini competitors that want to keep their butt, they want to keep the fullness. I'm not a fan of fasted cardio. There's not really a need for it. But yeah, when there's too much muscle on your legs, the only way to strip that is to starve the muscle and just break it down. And fasted cardio, I feel like breaks down the leg muscles the best in my personal experience.
Wow. Okay. And any type of cardio, or is there a specific one you're using to strip that down?
Definitely not the Stairmaster. I would say just walking, like, because you don't want to engage your quads or flare anything up. Literally just walking. So I am very cardio specific with every client. Like if someone's trying to keep their legs fuller, they're going to be on the Stairmaster. If someone, is working on like certain parts of their legs, it could be the Stairmaster, it could be incline on a treadmill. It's not just you do X amount of cardio. I'm very directive with how they do the cardio and what type.
That's really insightful because I think sometimes you just want to do whatever cardio you like. Like I used to love the Stairmaster. I used to love running if I got cardio. And now I'm like, I just walk on an incline or do the elliptical, and that's about what I'm allowed to do. And I like it.
Yeah.
It's fine. Sometimes I miss running or I miss getting on the Stairmaster and crushing it, but that's just not the goal. So to have a coach who actually gives you that direction is so important.
Yeah. And again, there's nothing wrong with other approaches. I've just found that cardio does matter, like how you're executing, not just executing.
Does that include like intensity?
So yes and no. So like if it's the stairs, I may give them the actual level and like do kickbacks with every other step if I'm trying to build their glutes, like their medial, their upper glute. But as far as like heart rate, if athletes want that, I can put it in. But ultimately, we're looking to shape the body, not just hit a certain threshold for your heart. Um, Again, it's like you're burning fat with your diet, everything else you're doing. I'm looking to shape your body, not just burn calories.
Hmm. Okay. And then are you a fan of water cutting?
Depends on the athlete.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I say water cutting, I also am like I should maybe specify this more because this has been confusing before too. Um Water manipulation. Like are you going to tell someone like okay, start with 2 gallons and then right before the show you've only had 16 ounces the night before, or are you like manipulating it depending on how they're looking?
It's per client. So if someone holds water, yes, I'm going to manipulate. If someone is sitting dry and tight, I don't want them any drier and harder than they need to be for bikini. So I'm just going to let them coast in. So it really is client to client, how thin their skin is and like what they can tolerate.
Okay, I have one more question that's rapid fire, and then I want to go back to what you said about the skin because that's something that's always interested me. So, are you kind of answer this, but steady state cardio or high intensity interval training for fat loss, especially when trying not to lose your glutes?
It really just depends on the athlete. I'm a fan of less cardio as you get closer to show period because I think a well rested body looks the best. So I like to get people lean in advance and then reverse them into the show. And that also sets off the reverse to be in a good place because if they do fall off track, we've already like minimized the cardio and increased food.
Honestly, though, like that has been my best experience as an athlete, reversing into a show. Like I almost, if I can avoid taking the old way where I didn't reverse into show, if I can avoid that, I will. Like if even if it requires another 8 weeks of prepping, like I would do it just for the benefit of how I felt and how I looked on stage.
Yeah, because mentally you're already in that place that you're dialed in, you're clicked in, you're ready to go. So it's like doing your cardio and then lowering it, you're going to hit everything to a T. So it's kind of, it helps on both ends. I feel like it makes them look better. They have more pop, more fullness. And in the bikini division right now, they love the full look. So it's not overly hard, grainy, like you can get docked for that. So it's like, I feel like it creates that really healthy, full, round, bubbly look that they like.
Yeah, like every time I go and there's like a posing seminar, they're always talking about like they don't want us flexing. They want us to look like just naturally like we're standing there and we just look like that. And so what that tells us is like they are looking for like that. When I say natural, I mean like a presentation that looks natural versus forced, not like natural in that way. So I want to go back to your point about yeah, I'm like, how do I say that when everything Everything means something else in this world. Oh man. So, skin. You had mentioned skin. So this is something that we heard like Maureen talk about and how she says she has thicker skin. But then like from a my perspective, I personally like have a difficult time necessarily identifying it on women. I can see it more on men, I feel like. But what is it that someone can look for to determine if they have thicker skin or if they have thinner skin and maybe they need to be filling out more?
So I would say thinner skin, you can see more vascularity like in yourself. So you'll be able to see veins pop out in your shoulders, or you're going to see more striations maybe in your glutes. And that would require more like filling out, opposed to, let's say you have like that thicker skin, you're not going to see any sort of vascularity just by looking at your shoulders, looking at your stomach. I feel like that is thick skin to me. It's almost like you have a film of water over you.
Okay, yeah, actually that makes a lot of sense because like I'm thinking specifically of Maureen because she's someone who's self-identified with thick skin. And I'm like, when she does do her poses and she makes her posts, like you can see that, yeah, you'll see like the outline of like a vein here and there in her shoulder, but it's generally not like this super vascular physique that we see some check-ins look like.
Yeah, it's not as grainy, and it's almost like there's a layer, it's like subcutaneous water that your body holds. So you're
Hmm.
almost like you're prone to holding more water, I feel like, if you have thicker skin. And again, each body's completely different, but that's just what I found.
Are there other things you look for as a coach when you're looking at someone like from a genetic standpoint that you're like, this could really benefit them or this could really hinder them?
Genetically, what's going to help someone the most is having symmetry. So up and down, right to left, like your ratios, and not having like an overly long torso or overly long legs. Like you want to be balanced. Obviously, if structurally, if you're wider, like you have like a wider, shoulder base, that can really help you in bikini. Like I'm very narrow, and that made me struggle for years. So it's not that one will stop someone from doing well, but there are people that genetically they don't have to grow their shoulders as much because their shoulders just pop out naturally.
Literally, yeah. Like I see that sometimes at shows. Like I'm walking around, I'm like that girl just like she looked like a swimmer almost. Like it's a wide look. I think Jen Dory, although I think she actually had she's built her shoulders a lot, of course, but I think she seems to have a wider. I guess it would be your clavicle area because she when she was walking, like that's very emphasized. But then again, maybe she's just built her shape to like look like that.
Yeah. So the best example I can think of is, Naima. She has
Yes. Yeah.
the
The
other,
Bikini Diaries. Yeah.
yeah, I love her. She worked for us for years. I coached her for years. She genetically was like very petite, but her structure, if she hit a pose, everything was there. If you saw her walking around, I'm like, you need like 2 years of just eating and building. But then when
Interesting.
you hit the pose, it's like structurally, she had nice broad shoulders. She had a teeny tiny waist, and she had these hips, and like everything was balanced. And like genetically, her structure was insane. So it's
Yes.
like she could do well by structure alone. And that does happen every now and then. You get someone that she doesn't have to be as lean, doesn't have to have as much muscle because she hits a pose and it's there.
That's so interesting, actually. Like, I didn't think about that, but it's true. Sometimes when people hit their poses, like all those come out even more, but you wouldn't expect it. And that's why then when you see someone on stage, you're like, wait, you look different up there than in person.
Yeah. And like, I know for myself, I'm a gym body. Like, people see me in the gym, like, oh, I love your butt. I love your shoulders. And then I get on stage and nothing looks right. Like, I'm tall, I'm lanky, I have like no waist because everything is just the same measurement. So it's like different seeing people in person too, just walking around versus when they're hitting a pose, because those poses are not necessarily flattering on everyone.
That's a great point. So true. And like if you naturally have like that curve, then when you hit an S curve, it's just gonna look or an S pose, it's gonna look more curved as opposed to if you are up and down and you hit it, you might look more like a X.
Yeah. And you can still make it work. I remember, I think it was Trey Bennett had called me after one of my last pro shows and was like, "Do you really want to build 5 inches on your lats? Because that's what this is going to take." And I'm like, I love my body. I do not want giant lats. Like, I do not want to
Mhm.
just build my lats just to try and balance my glutes. And like, it's like everyone's different though and has different things they care about. Like for some people, that's worth it for competing. For me, I was like, done, out, like buzzer, no.
That's actually really great to hear because it's easy to get so wrapped up into it that you forget what body you actually want to live in every day. Was it hard for you to walk away or were you like, I'm good with this?
I think that, I had plenty of time to compete. I enjoyed it and I still got to be in the industry. So I feel like for me, it wasn't really like leaving. And for me, getting on stage was always scary because I just don't like being the center of attention. I'm just that type of person. I like to be behind the scenes in sweatpants and glasses, like fixing someone's tan and like light up when they get on stage. That brings me a lot more joy. So I feel like for me, it wasn't hard. I feel like I had a lot of clarity though when I did it, is that I knew that I didn't want to have the body I would need to do well in bikini, that I loved my body how it was.
Did you ever feel pressure to continue competing as a coach?
Um, I think when I first turned pro and was competing and then stopped, I felt like I did. I felt like in order to have a name, I'd have to compete and do well. When the longer I've done this, I think it's honestly been beneficial to not compete, and to not be an athlete myself, because I don't want to be dealing with clients that are on diets while I'm on a diet. Like I'm very, very good at the balance portion. I think I really learned that the last time I competed. Odo ran me through a prep. It was my first time having a coach. So I did, 44 shows by myself, and my last, whatever one I did with him. And it was such a fun learning experience just to see how he does things. He is very, very strict. And I feel like, to coach Olympians and stuff, you have to be very dialed in on everything. But for me, I got weird with food, and I realized mid prep, I can never do this again because I want to have my body that I love year round. I don't want to like blow up after this. And I like felt it coming. I'm like, this is going to be rough. And I just like, I just knew it wasn't for me anymore. And there was a time and a place, and I was at a different point in my life. Like I really want to spend time with my friends and my family, and I want to be healthy, but I don't necessarily want to step on stage.
Totally. I think we could both like outline what a bikini prep diet would look like on a meal plan form. We could be like, this is exactly what people would eat. But like I could just I just know exactly what it is. I know how many almonds they're gonna eat. I know how many egg whites. I know that they're having blueberries in their oats. Like I know these things because we've been in it and we've seen it, but it doesn't mean it works for everybody. And then you take that individual approach, or yourself well enough. Now, some people, that's like perfect. That's what they're going to do. It works best for them. And I think it serves a lot of people as well. Or you do a macro plan, but you make your own meal plan. That's just like that anyways, because those are the foods that help us meet our macros without being overwhelmed with hunger.
Sorry.
So I know I heard that. No, you're good. You're
That
good.
was an Amber alert.
Hopefully. You're good. I was like, dang, first call I didn't hear. Yeah, so I think you felt that. You know yourself well enough after 44 shows that you were like, okay, if this is what it takes and this is where I have to go, is this realistically something I want to do? When I actually like coaching more, I like being behind the scenes more. I also think you explaining how at first you felt that pressure to keep competing was really interesting, because I've heard some coaches talk about how they feel like if they don't perform well on stage, then they'll hurt their business. And then I've heard some who say like if they compete continuously, it'll help their business. So I think you make the great point of doing what you actually want to do for yourself is the most important.
Yeah, and I don't want to compete in Olympia. I want to coach girls that are in the Olympia. And I know that 100%. And sometimes it takes you just getting back on stage and going, yeah, you know what? This is not for me. My last pro show I did, I had 4 of my clients competing with me, and they all placed above me, which honestly like made me ecstatic. I also got in trouble for almost not getting on stage too, because I was like fixing one of their tans backstage.
Oh
So
my
like
God.
my lesson was learned. I was like, I'm done. Like this chapter is closed. And
Totally.
yeah, now I can watch Nicole win.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Man, yeah, she's amazing, and she's
Yeah.
gonna continue to be. I love watching her prep, and she brings so much value to the industry too.
Yeah. I love her to pieces. And we worked together for so long. And she recently left. I think it was it last year? Yeah, we're in 2024. She went to go work with James, and like with her death, we still keep in touch. And like, I coached her for so long, and you can never be upset about someone going, hey, I'm going to try something different, because we won multiple pro shows. Like I have no complaints about our time together.
Exactly. Like you can still be happy for her as a competitor. Yeah, I get that. I think that says a lot more. I think it's better to leave a team gracefully, or to let a client go and leave gracefully, than it is to like cause any drama too.
Yes. And if you don't cause trauma, the thing is sometimes it just comes full circle. Sometimes like I support someone who really hasn't had other coaching experiences, want to try something different. Like, I
Totally.
totally get that, you know? And I have had so many clients where I am their first coach. They turn pro with me, you know, they do pro shows and then they want to try something different. And like, I understand that. Like, you know, you've always done the same thing. You don't know if like the grass is greener because you don't even know what's on the other side. Like, you just had this experience. So it's fun to add different experiences. It's also nice to have those athletes just come back full circle. And there's like a different appreciation and a different relationship you can have with them now that they've had that full circle. And they can even bring insight as well.
That's what another coach had said too. They were like, sometimes it's nice because then they come back and they have even more of that trust and understanding that, oh, now you get it. It wasn't a coach on this series, someone I'd spoken with in person, but they were saying that that's been their experience. Like there's a level of trust that gets redeveloped.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you have, and this may be not the best example, but you have a relationship that goes sour, it doesn't work out, trust is broken, and then you come back later on and, you know, try again. It's like you never know because now it's like you've been through that. You know, you don't want to lose that person. And I know that like my best friend is in that situation. She's getting married to someone that like they had a falling out, they're back together, and it's better than ever because you learn, wow, I don't want to lose this person. Like this is what I want. And sometimes,
Yeah.
you know, you have to learn the hard way.
So true. Unfortunately, so true. And and if we let ourselves fall into the story of like, oh, it's supposed to look this way or be this perfect or look like how someone else is, we actually might miss what's meant for us.
Yes. And that's why I think just having grace and being accepting of like how things come to you because it is happening for a reason, even if you don't understand it at that time.
Yeah. Oh, I like that a lot. That's so true. Now, is there anything I didn't ask you that you think I should have or that you wanted to shine light on?
I don't think so, other than just balance, just having athletes focus more on everything and not just the one thing and the one show and just focusing on, whoops, sorry. I'm having quite the fun day. But yeah, no, I mean, I feel like you hit everything and I just want everyone to take care of themselves and think about like how everything's impacting them long term and if it aligns with them long term opposed to these short term goals. We can all be very short sighted and want gratification now, but you know, thinking about what's going to happen in 5 years, 10 years down the road.
Do you feel like that's the question you need to ask yourself in order to actually take or find a balanced approach?
Yeah, I think instead of asking yourself, can I diet like this for a week, for 16 weeks, it's like, can I live this lifestyle for 5 years? So, and that's why it's also finding a coach that, you know, makes sense for you too, because some people don't need like meals out. I would say Nicole's one of those special people that she literally could follow a meal plan all the time. And I am not one of those people. I am one of these people that like I have to like have some variety, some Thai food, some sushi. Like I cannot function eating the same thing every day for 5, 6 years.
Totally.
Yeah.
I remember when I used to demonize sauces, and then I was like, why am I never let now I have sauce on something, and if I'm in prep, I track it. If I'm not, I don't. And that's what works for me. And it's you do have to find what, like you said, what can you actually sustain long term? Because a lot of times what I find and what I hear is, oh, I keep falling off track. I keep falling off track. And I'm like, I don't know that you're the problem. It almost sounds like the track is the problem. Like if the train kept going off the track, you think they're looking at the train? Probably not. There's probably something happening with the track. So stepping back and evaluating why you're doing what you're doing and how it's going to affect your life, I think is really key. But also you came to terms with what you knew you needed for your life. You accepted that about yourself. Some people, I think, have a difficult time accepting it because they think, oh, I can't be successful if I don't do it like that person.
Yeah, and there's a million different ways to get on stage. So there is no one prep that's going to work for everyone. And you can do that with having more flexible meals, more intuitive days. Your prep may take longer, but there are different ways to approach things where it's not there isn't this one way. So I feel like knowing what you need and then also finding someone who can align with that and can support what you need as an athlete.
Love that. Well, I appreciate you coming on. How can people connect with you and work with you?
So if they're interested in working with us, they can go to teambossbodies.com and hit apply or email us with questions at teambossbodies@gmail.com. I would say DM me on Instagram, but it's not a good idea. If you DM the Boss Bodies Instagram, that will work in your favor. But yeah, we're definitely open to people who are a good fit for our culture and for the athletes we already have. Like we just want to have a good community.
Awesome. Okay, well, we'll put that in the show notes page. You guys, that's on celestial.fit/podcast. if you're watching this right away, it'll be at the top of the page. If you're listening in the future, scroll down to the category section and you'll find it all alphabetized there. The other thing too is tag us after you listen. Maybe tag Team Boss Body's Instagram. And if you want to tag Casey's too, but tag us, let us know what you thought about the episode, what you learned, or maybe follow-up questions you might have. And thank you guys for tuning into another episode of the Coaches series. And Casey, thanks for being a part of it.
And thank you for having me.